Okay, in this tutorial I'm going to break this drawing down into steps that are way easier to follow than you might imagine, so you can create this magical egg scene and amaze yourself. Okay, so as I explained in the intro, I'm going to break this down into steps so that not only you learn about the painting process and techniques, but also about the app that I'm using, Procreate. But that isn't to say you couldn't use a different app on a different tablet and still follow along. Having said that, within the app Procreate, I'm using their default A4 canvas, which is 297 by 210 millimeters at 300 dpi. I'm also using Procreate's default color profile on the A4 canvas, which is sRGB, and it's the code that ends in 2.1 here on the list. In terms of the brushes, I'm using some of the default brushes within Procreate. So in terms of those, I'm using the airbrushing soft brush, medium brush, and the medium hard brush. Within charcoals, I might use the burnt tree brush. Within industrial, I might use the rusted decay brush. Within organic, I might use the rainforest brush. And in terms of the colours, I've already pre-selected a colour palette. Each of these colours, if you go to the value section, has what we call a hexadecimal code associated with it. Each of these codes is down in the video description. You just need to copy and paste them into this box one at a time. Press enter, the colour will appear up here, and then you can tap it into a blank colour palette for yourself. Or alternatively, to save you some time, there is a link next to the codes in the description that takes you to my Patreon page, where you can download the whole colour file for free to save you some time. And Patreon is also the place that you can support this channel and gain access to exclusive content, such as extended versions of most of these tutorials and more. I'd like to say a massive thank you to those people who do support me over at Patreon. It really does make a huge difference, so thank you so much. And if you want to support this channel but Patreon is not really your style, then the simplest way of doing that is to simply subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and maybe even leave me a comment, maybe a suggestion. And with all of that said and done, we're going to get started. So the first thing we're going to do on layer 1 is we're going to go to our colours. I'm going to use the first colour on the top row. I'm going to drag from the colour circle in the top corner into the canvas and it flood fills. Now please just be aware that some of the colours on my screen might look a little bit different on yours, partly due to the way that different screens are calibrated, but also my camera is going to throw off the colours a little bit. But don't worry, if you've got the codes or you've downloaded the file, you are using the same colour as me. I'm going to go to my layers and create a new layer, layer 2. I'm going to go to the organic rainforest brush. Now I have changed the settings. I'm going to show you by tapping on the brush, go to the stroke path, and it's at 50% spacing and done. I'm going to go to the second colour on the top row. I'm going to put it initially maybe about 6% size, 50% strength. And I'm just going to run some of this colour through. I want to kind of create a mottled look. I don't want that green to be flat. There's going to be lots of other colours built in as well, but we initially just get rid of some of that green. We're going to go to the third colour, same layer, tap through quite a bit of this colour, maybe even a bit more than the green, or certainly the brown anyway. Spread some of that through, go back to my colours, fourth colour, and again we're just creating a real mixture of colours in here, really to ramp up the kind of mottled look overall. I'm going to go to the adjustments, the Gaussian blur, and I'm just going to blur that across to about the 15%, deselect, and then I'm just going to go to the layer, slide and duplicate it, and it's just going to ramp it up, make it even more impactful. Top layer, tap on it, merge down, and then they've gone back to being one layer again. Go to the plus symbol, create a new layer, layer 3. I'm going to go to the fifth colour, and I'm going to start introducing some of this. I might just turn it up a little bit from the 6, maybe to about 9%. It is also pressure sensitive, so you press on more or you press lightly, you get two different effects. So something like a mid pressure is going to get you this kind of look. It's not really possible to describe the pressure you're applying, but it's not too light and it's not too heavy, so somewhere in the middle there. Then I'm going to move to the next green, which is the 6th colour. And obviously we want to create a sense of greenery in the background. We've got trees, we've got foliage, we've got light coming through. We want it all to kind of mix together a little bit. I'm going to take that layer, adjustments, Gaussian blur, and again I'm going to blur it in. About 10% should do. And it's subtle, we're just building this up, but you can see without that layer it does look quite different. I am going to create a new layer, layer 4, and I'm going to go to the end colour on the top row, the 10th colour. I'm going to go in with the airbrushing soft brush, maybe 5% size, 30% strength, and I'm just going to start building in some trees, getting the placement in initially. They can lean off, they can be clustered. You find the appropriate kind of concentration of trees that you think works for you. Might make that tree trunk a little broader, a bit thicker. And some of them can be a little bit more, or rather a little bit less noticeable, I should say, really. I'm going to turn it up to about 15% size and then just tap in generally. I want to darken up this in areas. Maybe land the kind of ground level a little bit more. Add slightly more dark texture in and around that bottom area. Just lots of taps, as you can probably hear. I'm going to go to that layer, adjustments, Gaussian blur, and I'm going to blur it in a little bit just to soften it in slightly. Maybe about 10% again, and deselect. Now I'm going to go to my layers again, create a new layer, layer 5, and I'm going to start using some of the slightly more vibrant greens just to pick out here and there some more greenery. So I might go to the 8th colour. It's really quite vibrant. I'm going to stay with a soft brush this time. I'm going to be more selective than the rainforest brush allows. About 5% size, still at the 30% strength. And I'm going to start tapping through this more vibrant green, but maybe a bit more selective than previously. It can go in front of the tree trunks here and there. I don't want to obscure them too much, however. And then as we get down to about 2/3 of the way down, or 1/3 of the way up, I'm going to start adding a bit more of this green around this point, which I suppose would represent something like the horizon line in this particular scene, although it's very blurred out. We're going to have a lot of sharp focus in the foreground element, but we're just tapping it through. Bring it in here. A bit more highlight impacting on the ground perhaps. We also have the 9th colour. I'm just going to turn that brush size down a little bit. 3%, still at the same opacity, and this colour can just be dispersed a little bit through. Again on the ground level. Can be quite effective. Just tap it in through that background area. Spread it around. Doesn't matter if you get the occasional bump of it that's just quite a bit heavy-handed and doesn't really matter here and there. Much of this is going to be obscured by our focal point anyway. So even then, if you kind of squint your eyes, or it gives that impression of a really blurred out background, it already is kind of allowing the imagination to roam. Imagine it as a background scene of trees, really. So I'm going to go to my layers and create a new layer, layer 6. I'm going to tap on the N and scroll down to the add. And that has changed the blend mode to add, which allows us to use different colors, create more of a kind of luminous glowing light effect in that area. So I'm going to stick with the soft brush initially. I'm going to put it up to a really big size, maybe 40%, but really low on the opacity, only about 5. I'm just going to tap it a few times, just subtly in that area, not too much. Okay, I'm going to create a new layer, layer 7. Again, tap on the little N, scroll down to the add. I'm going to go in with the medium hard brush within airbrushing. I'm going to go to the first colour on the middle row. 10% size, about 60% opacity, and then just start tapping in and just light taps, concentrations of these kind of bokeh light effects. There is a bokeh lights brush within luminance, but it's a little difficult to control exactly where it goes. If you use something like the airbrushing medium hard brush with the blend mode on add, we can create a very similar effect, but just a bit more controlled as to where we put it. Press on a bit harder here and there. And then lightly in places too. And then over here, I just want to press it really lightly. Still build it up a little bit, but just don't press on anywhere near as much. Press on a few more times up in this corner. There is going to be a concentration of light. Then I can go to the adjustments, the Gaussian blur, blur it across to about the 10%. Go to the layer slide and duplicate it. Now it does brighten it up. The colour is a little bit too rich, so on that top version, adjustments, view saturation and brightness, go to the saturation, turn that down to about 30%, and I feel that that sits a little bit better. I think I prefer that. Back to my layers, create a new layer, layer 9. Still going to go in with the airbrushing soft brush. Back to these colours. We've used the first colour on the middle row. We're going to go for the second colour. 2% size, maybe about 40% strength. And then in some of these areas, we're just going to start building in some shapes. Maybe a touch bigger on that. 3% maybe. A couple of rocks starting to emerge in here, but nothing majorly distinct. Go along to the third colour, turn that even lower. 2%, maybe just the top edge, just catching the light. Still 2%, just a little higher on there. Within the brush percentage sizes, there's a little bit of variation, so sometimes you need to do it at the top end or the lower end. Any given brush. Adjustments, Gaussian blur. I'm just going to blur that in to about 10%. Deselect. Back to my layers, new layer, layer 10. I do like to keep everything separate for the most part. We will perhaps merge some of these layers if they get too cumbersome, but for now we're okay. We've got 10 layers. On this layer, I'm still going to go in with the soft brush with an airbrushing, but I'm going to go for a dark colour, so we'll go for the fourth colour on the middle row. And we're really going to have to start darkening up much of this area, so I'm going to put it maybe about 15% size. I think it went to 16 then, but it doesn't really matter. Just darken up this lower area. Especially at the bottom. Reduce that down, maybe 4%, and then we can just get some extra shadows there underneath the rocks. Tap some of it up into these areas. Tap it through. We're going to have our egg form around here, so we don't need to worry about behind there. Something like this, just setting the stage for what we're going to add in a moment, like so. Get into my layers, new layer, layer 11. I'm going to go to the organic rainforest brush, tap on it, spacing within stroke path at 50%, done. Back to my colours, going to go along to the 8th colour, 5% size, 20% strength. And we're just going to start building some texture in and around this lower area. We'll start off pretty subtle. We want to create some variation of textures even within the shadows, but we have to start quite subtle initially if we're going to do depth even in the dark areas. So add some of that through. You don't have to add it into every single available space, but it helps if you get a good coverage. Then we can go to the 9th colour. Again, some variation, a blue tone to this as well. We are definitely going to add some warmer greens, really vibrant greens, but I think for this base, if we get some cool colours in there as well, it can be quite useful. Then we've got the 10th colour on the middle row, which is considerably brighter, and we're going to use that for the top edge here. And this is just an approximation. This gives us the texture without a great deal of having to go into the individual details. It's not so much laboured over as it could be. Some of this green down here. Presumably we're going to get a little area when you get a depth of field with something like a photograph. Sometimes when it gets really close to you, then it goes a little bit out of focus, and we can play around with that too. We're just setting the stage for the foreground focal element initially. Then we can go in there a bit more hands-on and actually control some of those textures too. But that sets like a nice stage, a little nest area almost for the egg. Go to our layers and create a new layer, layer 12. Now at this point we want to put in an egg shape. Now you can grab an outline of an egg and create this easily for yourself, but what we want to put in here initially is a bright yellow egg, and I've got this first colour on the bottom row. Over at my Patreon you can download the image that I'm about to put in now. It will be available to download along with the colour palette. If you don't want to do that, however, then you just need to find an image of an outline of an egg, put it in here as a layer, and then just drag that into the center of your outline of an egg. Either way, once you've got your egg shape, what we want to do is go to the selection, automatic, select the outside of the egg, just slide it across, hopefully so it grabs all of the extra detail outside of the egg, tap on that layer and clear, and it should get rid of everything. Now there might just be a little remainder a few artifacts around the outside, which there is, and mine. So I'm going to go to the eraser, put the eraser to the medium brush with an airbrushing, 100% opacity, 4% size, and just go around that edge, remove all of that, go to the transform. You know when there's something extra there because it hasn't cropped it tightly. Doesn't really matter, I suppose, but if you do want to move it around and distort it, then it's useful to get rid of anything that might be around the edges. Just go in there and erase it. That seems to have cropped it better. So I'm going to go to the transform. I'm just going to find a placement that I'm happiest with. So maybe sat over slightly to the right. I might just increase the size somewhere about there. Feel happiest with. I'm going to create a new layer above it. Tap on the new layer and put on the clipping mask, which creates a little arrow and links it to this inserted image layer. That means whenever I add something on top now, it's going to stop at the boundary of that previous layer. When it comes to that first layer, inserted image, I might actually go to the adjustments, the Gaussian blur, and just to stop it having a crisp edge, I'm just going to slide that across 3% and deselect. Just softens the edges a little bit. Back on layer 13, I'm going to go in with the industrial rusted decay brush, and I'm going to go in with the second colour on the bottom row, 5% size, 100% opacity, and we're just going to start building in some textures. In fact, we could start with a bigger size. Let's be a bit bolder. 10%. Start around the outer edges a little bit. Get rid of some of the yellow. I think I want most of the glow from the yellow to be more central at the front of the image. So let's just shut down quite a lot of the yellow. Now you can press lightly as well, so it does it more gradually. We don't necessarily want to get rid of the yellow completely in some areas. And we can also use this as a separate layer. So if we feel like we've gone over the yellow too much in any place, then we can just use the eraser and dial it back and reveal more of that yellow colour later on. It's got a really nice kind of smattering of colour and texture. I'm going to turn it down from 10 to maybe about 6. That way we can get some slightly more smaller, more refined textures in there as well. Swirl it around, press lightly, blend it in places. Maybe turn it down even more, 4%. That way we can afford to be just, again, a little bit more controlled in places. We're almost creating like kind of islands, like continents. Imagine it's like the globe atlas, and we're creating sort of continents amidst an ocean. Helps sometimes to see it that way, and then you can think about the way that it's kind of forming. So I'm going to create a new layer above that, layer 14. Again, tap on it and put on the clipping mask. It does exactly the same thing. So we're going to move to, in fact, we might skip the third colour, go to the fourth colour. It's a bit too vibrant, the third colour. We do have a use case for that in this tutorial, but it isn't really this section. So with this fourth colour, let's just take it around the peripheral. Now we don't want to completely obscure all of the light orange colour at all. We want to encroach upon it in places. Let's just move it around the canvas. There's going to be large areas where this orange is not visible at all, but we just want to start gradually, slowly shutting down some of the yellow. I think sometimes it's useful just to do it incrementally rather than all at once. Like I say, you can always go back in and add more of the yellow colour if you feel you want to. Connect some of these up, little islands and areas that join these up. Maybe turn it down even more, 3%. Again, imagining this is land and ocean and little islands on a map. Obviously it isn't, it's just textures around an egg, but I do find it useful to view it that way. And much of this orange that we're adding now probably is not going to be visible at the end either, but we can use this as a starting point. Maybe we were going to introduce quite a lot of cooler colours, darker colours, cooler colours. So we'll just start off with this and then go from there. Shut down more up here in this area. It's not necessarily right and wrong with this. Like many organic kind of shapes and forms, kind of looks pleasing to you. So shutting it down a lot more than this, or even a lot less than this, might work better for you and your taste and what you like. So feel free to experiment with this. Okay, might come back to adding more of this colour, but for now we're going to move on. Now, one way we could do this is tap on that layer and also put on the alpha lock, which means then we can go to an even darker colour, the 5th colour, and then it won't allow us to add it anywhere other than within the confines of that darker orange, which could be really useful too. That means that you can be a little bit looser. You don't really need to be worried about putting it in the wrong places. Again, shut down much of that light on the peripheral. Let's turn that up a little bit more, 5%, scribble it in, and you should start to get this kind of glowing effect coming from the egg. The more light we shut down, the more it should amplify that kind of overall aesthetic. Okay, perhaps we'll create a new layer, layer 15. I'm actually going to tap on the layer, put on the clipping mask again, which again links it to that inserted image. If you get rid of the inserted image, it gets rid of everything. Move along. I'm going to move along to the 7th colour. And they should be dramatically darker at this point. Again, take it around the edges. Be a bit careful when we start getting to these edges of these orange shapes. We don't want to destroy some of that really nice red orange. Turn it down 3%. And let's just bring it in a bit more tightly, closer to some of these edges, maybe even lower. 2%. Again, some little points. Bring it almost to the edge of this dark orange and red colour. That way it has like a little red, deep red that goes around the edge of this colour, perhaps. We definitely want quite a bit of this colour introduced. If you do too little of this dark colour, then when we start adding real kind of cooler colours that are reflected off the surface of this dark base, then you're not going to leave yourself much room to do those really nice textures on top with the cooler colours. So you definitely need to have a substantial amount of this dark colour. I think probably more of it up in the top area actually, because that's where we're going to have most of the kind of ambient light, the light from the sky, the general area bouncing in those areas. So don't neglect to do it up here. Again, tap it in. Imagine it as little islands in the ocean, joining up continents and areas on the map. We can always subdue this dark colour if we need to later on, but for now, I'd add quite a lot of it. Maybe turn the opacity down to 60%. Bring it around the edges. Up again in size, 4%, maybe more of it here. And then as you get to the edges of that bigger shape, you could just use a smaller brush, so back down to 2% maybe, just around the edges, just for the refinement of that edge. And once we start adding some of these lighter textures, nothing wrong with going back. And once we start adding some of these lighter textures, there's nothing to say we can't go back and add more of these darker tones. It's all on separate layers, so we can go back and affect any of those previous layers, not a problem. And I do encourage you to play around with these different layers until you get an effect that you're happy with. But for now, I'm going to move on. I'm going to slide and duplicate layer 15. On the top version, tap on it and put on the alpha lock. That means I can add other colours to it now. So I'm going to go for the 8th colour, and I'm actually going to change to the charcoal's burnt tree brush, 20% size, maybe about 30% strength. I'm just going to start adding in this texture. We can go around the edge again because it has a clipping mask on, and it also has an alpha lock on. So we're not going to be able to add it to this area or this area, which is perfect. We'll skim around the edges, up here, around there, and it's only adding it to the kind of dark brown areas at this point. With that layer, I might go to the adjustments, the hue, saturation and brightness, just turn the brightness down a little bit actually, to about 46% and deselect, and then we can continue. I feel like the base of that dark colour, especially down here, it needs to be darker. You can always lighten it up at the top with these extra colours now. I'm going to go to the 9th colour, again continue to add this. Skim around the edges. I'm almost really kind of directing the pressure outside of the egg, just so it skims the edge. I'm going to go back to the 8th colour, bring it in some of these areas down here. It gets more and more as it comes up here. And we can use lighter colours too, so we could go back to maybe the 4th colour, have it blending in, which is quite a nice effect. I'm going to go to the 10th colour, I'm going to turn it down, maybe 5%, and then I definitely want some of that to be more prominent at the very top. Just skimming around the edge a little bit, not too much, and around that side. Maybe build this up a little bit more on top, tap it in, so it has a texture, but also the tapping is adding to that kind of uneven surface look. Keep zooming out. Tap it in, again create that slightly more uneven look with less regular kind of application. Create some more lumps and bumps on that texture, which could be quite nice. Let's go back to the 8th colour, use that technique down here, those kind of lumps. I might go back to layer 13, and at this point you can start shutting it down with more of those previous colours. So the 2nd colour on the bottom row, where were we? We'll probably go back to the industrial rusted decay brush, 8% size, 60% strength or so, and well, I think I might just shut down a bit more some of that yellow. Now that I know where these other forms are, I can work in and around them in a way that's quite nice. Again, reduce some of that yellow. I might just give it another layer of yellow at the very top, just to really ramp it up in places. But for now, I'm going to slightly subdue it, bring it more to the center, reduce it. You can't destroy the upper layers because this is a layer previous, so it's quite useful. And then go back to the layers, maybe layer 14, tap on it, turn off the alpha lock. Go back in with, well, let's try the 5th color, same brush, but reduce it 5% size, tap it in. In fact, I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to go to the 4th color. I'd like a little bit more of that first. About playing around with it, finding the right balance. I'm going to go to the inserted image. I'm going to go in with the eraser, and I'm going to set the eraser to the organic rainforest brush. 4% size, maybe 70% strength, and I can just go in now and I can remove the bottom bit of that egg. It's going to help just sort of bury it in the ground, in the surrounding kind of moss and grass and whatever else is there. That could be really useful. Just helps settle it into that space a bit better. Again, go back to layer 15. I'm going to go in maybe with the 4th color on the middle row. Rusted decay brush, 10% size, maybe 20% strength. And I'm just going to start building in some darkness here where it blends into the ground. And I might just generally darken up some of these areas too. I quite like the impact that some of that darkness will have. Reduce down some of that light. I think it's probably important to do that. I think that settles it nicely in the ground as well. Then I'm going to go to the layers at the top, create a new layer, layer 17, tap on the end, scroll down to the add, blend mode. I'm going to go in with the 1st color on the bottom row. And I'm going to be more selective. I'm going to go in with the airbrushing soft brush, 2% size, 40% strength. And then I can really be controlled. In some of these lighter areas, I can just ramp it up even more. I want to be a bit more judicious with this, so I don't want to absolutely put it everywhere, but you can see just that little bit is just bringing through quite a nice effect in places. So be selective. You don't want to add this absolutely everywhere. Again, be selective. You can have it in some of these areas just emerging through, but you don't want to overwork that. Maybe that's about enough. I might come back to the egg, add a little bit more of it, but I'm just going to bring a little area here that's going to be a bit more in focus. So create a new layer, layer 18. I might just go in with the organic rainforest brush, 10th color on the middle row, 2% size, 100% opacity, and then I'm going to start creating some areas here. Just skim it along the top edge. There's just bits of this texture that will stick up, catch whatever ambient light there is in our scene. Perhaps just play around with it. And it's just going to be a little bit more in focus, just like the egg is. Perhaps I'll switch to the airbrushing soft brush. We could try some other colours. I'm going to try the 9th colour on the top row. Low on that 2% size, 40% strength. And again, I'm just going to bring some of these colours in. Might even turn that lower down. Really low on the 2%. In amongst some of this texture, I can just bring in some of this lighter colour as well. Just build up this kind of mossy grass texture. Maybe turn the opacity up a little bit. 50%. Tap it through here. Let's try another colour. 8th colour on the top row. Go backwards, 7th colour on the top row. Slightly cooler colour. Just creating some points of texture, bringing some of it down here. Let's turn it up a little bit. 3%. And we're just getting more blobs really. Just points of texture. Maybe we should add a couple of more foreground rocks. So we'll stay on the same layer. We'll go for medium hard brush. Go for 4th colour on the middle row. 4% size, 100% opacity. Let's create a little rock in here. Maybe just a little rock in here. Go in with 2nd colour on the middle row. Charcoal, burnt tree brush. 8% size, 30% strength. Let's build some of that into this little rock shape here maybe. Blend it into the ground. Something over here as well. What else have we got? We've got really nice blue colour here, so that's the 7th colour on the middle row. Build some of that onto the rock over here, blend it in. This one a little bit. Don't need to do too much. Just a few points of blue through here, and then how about a lighter blue? So the 3rd colour on the middle row. A bit lighter in here, a bit less there, a bit more in shadow. Zoom in, let's turn it right down. 2% size. That way I can, actually we'll go for a different brush. Airbrushing, medium hard brush, 2% size, 100% is too much. Let's go for 50% opacity. That way I can just control the edge a little bit, give it a slight sharpness. That kind of works. Let's go to the whole layer, tap on that Gaussian blur and just blur it in slightly, 6%. Create a new layer above that, layer 19. And again, we just need to work on that focal area. So a few more sharper points. So I'm going to go back in with the soft brush with an airbrushing just into the 2% size, 50% strength. That's even lower on that 2%. And then we can just go in here and just continue to work some of these highlights. Points of texture, maybe that vibrant green on the middle row, that 10th colour. A few points of texture. And we could do this with the rainforest brush. It's quick, certainly, but sometimes just putting those little points of texture in a slightly more controlled way, and I think you get a little bit of a better effect. As much as I love the rainforest brush, it is just useful to do it by hand. I'm going to put this down to 30% opacity. Yeah, my rainforest brush is probably my favourite brush overall for these kinds of textures. It just works so fantastically, saves so much time. But then sometimes it's worth spending the time putting it in more manually, because you can definitely be more controlled exactly where you put it. Not quite as random, and as much as the random sometimes is exactly what you want and works really well in its own way, putting it in a more controlled way is sometimes also exactly what you want. So combinations of the two I find work really nicely. Now I need a cooler colour, 9th colour, top row. A few points, maybe the 9th colour on the bottom row in fact. We used it on top of the egg, so there's every reason to think if it's reflecting off the egg, then it should reflect off other areas in the environment too. Let's just really focus in and around the egg. We haven't got the clipping mask on for this layer, but it doesn't really matter, just give it a slight line around the edge. I'm going to create a new layer, layer 20, tap on the end, scroll down to the add blend mode, and I'm going to go to my brushes, the luminous light pen. I'm going to go to the 3rd colour on the bottom row. 100% size, maybe only 10% strength, and just circling this colour. You might need to do bigger circles in some places. Go over it lots of times to start bringing this in, and I don't mind it blending with some of the bokeh light effects in the background. You just want to bring a little bit of magic into the scene, blending these different elements together. So some lower down, some higher up, floating around the environment. Don't necessarily need to do a huge amount of them. Then we could turn that opacity up from 10 to 30%, and then one or two we can just go over, ramp them up a little bit more. Add new ones that are extra bright. And it brings some of that glow together. Don't do too many of them though. I think sometimes subtlety, slightly less, is actually more. Bit of a cliche, but it's true. Back down again. Stay on this same layer with the luminous pen. I'm going to go to the 9th colour on the bottom row. So light pen, 100% size, about 15% strength. Just going to trace around the top of the egg a little bit. It just gives it a little bit of a glow at the top, which I think is quite useful. Might go back to layer 15, back in with a charcoal burnt tree brush, still on this colour, so still on the 9th colour on the bottom row, 10% size, 30% strength, and just blend it in a little bit. Bit more of that colour, bit more of the 8th colour, soften it in places. Like I say, your egg is going to be unique. It's going to be slightly different than mine. Find the right balance for yours. Back in with the soft brush, still on the top layer, maybe to the 9th colour, on the 2% size, 10%, and just that edge is a little bit of an anomaly there. And also just ramp it up around that edge as well, just a little bit more. Slightly brighter line, I think, works better for it. I feel like I could add a little bit more of a cool light in the centre, so I'm going to go for 5% size, 10% strength. I'm going to ramp it up a few times there just to build in an extra kind of white colour. I think that helps. 2% size, 10% strength again. A couple of pieces here in the foreground of that. And I think we're pretty much there with this tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed following along. I hope you've learned a few tips and tricks along the way, and I hope you've enjoyed recreating this for yourself. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and I shall see you back here soon. Bye for now.